So the first category is called judging. So now let's remember that some of the spiritual texts have talked about this. And, well, the first part is not that, but let's look at both of these. Judging others is a dangerous thing, not so much because you may make mistakes about them, but because you may be revealing the truth about yourself. Interesting. Projection there. You remember that the short version that you learned if you grew up in the Christian tradition was, judge not that ye be not judged. Does anybody remember that from anywhere? You might remember this one. Before you try to remove the speck from your brother's eye, first remove the log from your own eye. Then you will see more clearly to remove the speck from your brother's eye. And actually, if you look at that deeply, you quickly realize that it's going to take more than one lifetime to remove the log from your own eye. I mean, it's just that none of us have it that together. That's my evaluation of it. And so that means I got to keep working the rest of my life on removing the log from my own eye so that maybe someday I'll get ready, but not in this lifetime, to try to remove the speck from your eye. That's about judgment and blame. So let's look at how we do this. This is a natural tendency, and we saw this a lot. This is where you're going to look at what's wrong with the other person rather than what's right with them. So let's talk about criticizing. You make a negative evaluation of the other person's thoughts, feelings, or actions. Do you remember high school? I don't know about your high school, but a lot of them, including mine, had cliques. You know, they were like groups. And the groups were great at looking at everything that was wrong with the group that wasn't their group. Do you know what I'm talking about? And they had little names for the groups, right? You know, so we had the, what do we have? The geeks or the brains and the jocks, and usually prefaced by dumb. And then we had the space queens, and we had, I don't know, I mean, it went on and on. Okay, the burnouts, right? So now we would use those as ways of criticizing them because they were different than us. And so we didn't want to understand them. We wanted to judge them. We wanted to blame them. And this happens in the workplace where you can get a kind of criticizing that is even more poisonous on teams, and it's something that we call triangulation. And this is where you do criticism, but you do it even more indirectly, dishonestly. So you have two people, and A is going to criticize B, but not to B's face. A's going to go over to C and talk to C about everything that's wrong with B. That's called triangulation. This happens in lunchrooms all over America, where, you know, people get together and they complain about somebody else rather than trying to deal directly with the person. Another way we do judging is name calling. So you could say certain names even today, and some of us would have an automatic emotional reaction where we'd want to dismiss whoever the person was. So if I say pro-life, some people have an automatic reaction. Okay, I don't like that person. Democrat, Republican, Libertarian. Some people even do it with professions. In school, the name calling with the, you know, the geeks and so forth. Isn't it interesting that some people got smart enough about taking a negative word that people were using in a negative way and transforming it into something positive? So you have, is it Best Buy? Somebody set up the Geek Squad. Was it Best Buy? Yeah. Yeah. So they took the name, and then you have this little Volkswagen running around that says Geek Squad on it, right? Okay. So you can transform it. I have a sister-in-law who's was a teacher, but she's also the librarian in a school district. And she noticed that the kids that were really good in information technology, computers, were often viewed negatively. They were the real brains. I mean, these are the kids with the straight A averages and so forth. And so she was going to transform their identity in the school system, and she set up a club of all the computer geeks and nerds, and then they invited all students who wanted to learn more about getting better at using computers to come in and be taught by the geeks and the nerds. And all of a sudden, see, this was what? taking the people who, and it was transformative in that school system. So now you got all the jocks in there who want to learn how, and they were the heroes in the school before, and all of a sudden they need the help of the person that they used to put down. Name calling. You see, if you call somebody a name, you put them in a negative box, and then you pretend that you already know. See, because the name makes you think you know, and when you think you know something, you can't learn anything. So there's nothing more to explore with this person, because I've already put them in a box, and I know what they're about. And the truth of the matter is you don't know anything yet. And then you add to that labels restrict in that way. So let's suppose, part of this is the problem of, I don't know if you remember your freshman English, but it's the problem of the English language and how we construct sentences. So in the English language, you have a subject, and then you often have some kind of a verb, and then some kind of a predicate or a predicate nominative or a predicate adjective. Does this ring any bells? Don't worry about the grammar. Let's just give you an example. One of you sees me do something that looks really stupid to you. So you come back to your colleagues, and you don't fully describe the situation because, time is too short to describe everything. So you just shorten it down to, Don is stupid. And you just tell everybody, Don guy's really stupid. Now, they might be interested in knowing why you think that, or they might not, and they might just say, yeah, I know what you mean. And so they all... Now, the problem is that what this does in the English language is it says Don equals stupid, and stupid equals Don. If you want to understand the essence of Don, just look over here. It's stupid. Now you got it, so there's not much more to know about him. And that's what happens when we do the name calling and the labeling. We give up on experiencing them in any other way. We deprive ourselves of the opportunity to learn anything different. Diagnosing. This is where you analyze other people's intent or motivation. You're pretending that you know what's going on with them without knowing anything about their life story, without knowing anything about their present situation. This is sometimes called, which we try to get people not to do in relationship therapy, mind reading. In other words, I'm pretending I already know what's going on in your mind, so I don't need to listen. And assuming. I assume where you're going with this. And of course, somebody once said that when you do that, you make one of these out of you and me. Right? So there's a lot of that goes on. So let me give you some examples of diagnosing and tell me how this would affect you. That often starts with a you statement. All right? So Sue, you know what your problem is? See, now is Sue really wanting to listen to this? Okay, do any of you have a boring life and you'd like to go home and heat your relationship with somebody up with a good conflict or a problem? I'm going to give you the ticket. Go home and start 5 sentences with you always and you never. And then just sit back and let the conflict come to you. Okay, see, I mean, that's diagnosing. Now, sometimes it's even more explosive when you get into emotions. Has anybody said to you, you're getting a little upset now? You're getting a little angry. And they're telling you what you're feeling. Oh, sometimes we do it with whole groups. So I've always been intrigued by what happens in women's restrooms, but I've never been in one at the time the women were there. But here's my fantasy about what happens is like, back in high school or whatever. They go in there and they're probably having a discussion that starts like this. You know how men are. And then we go on, right? It's the diagnosing, right? And men, of course, are doing the same thing. You know how women are. And isn't it odd that when you have family gatherings, sometimes the women are all out in the kitchen talking and the men are all in, does this happen in your family at all? And then you sort of go, do they ever talk about the other gender in a less than complimentary way? Okay, that's all diagnosing. Let's go on to praising evaluatively. Most people think that this is a good thing. Because when you praise evaluatively, you're telling something good about another person. So, I go up to Dave and say, hey, Dave, it's a great job you're doing here, and blah, blah, blah. And so, maybe Dave feels pretty good about that, right? Now, there's a hidden thing that most people don't understand about praising evaluatively, and that is, when you do that, the message under the message is, if I can evaluate you positively, I can also evaluate you negatively. That's the hidden message, all right? And it also sets you up to pretend that you need my approval. That's another hidden message, all right? So let me tell you a more powerful way to do it. I'm going to tell you about two teachers. One has figured out that praising evaluatively is not the strongest strategy. The other one hasn't. So we're going to ask, all of you now are back in first grade, and I'm asking you to draw a picture of what you did last summer. So you're all working on your drawings. So little Billy runs up to the teacher first. He's got his drawing done. He says, hey, teach, look at my drawing. And the first teacher says, wow, Billy, that's a beautiful drawing. That's I really like the colors you used and how you put all those things in it. And your drawing is so good, Billy, that we'd like to put it up here on the bulletin board so everybody can enjoy your beautiful drawing. Okay, so do you hear all the praise? Is Billy feeling like he's hot stuff? Probably. All right, so that's not the most powerful way to do it. Here's the empowering teacher and how she does it. Little Billy finishes his thing, runs up and says, hey, teach, look at my picture here. And the teacher looks at it for the longest time, and then she turns to Billy and she says, Billy, tell me, what do you like about your picture? And what she just did is she put the locus of evaluation back in the child. She said to the child, you have the ability to decide whether it's good. You don't need anybody else's opinion. It's only important if you liked it. You're doing it for you. You're not doing it for anybody else. Do you hear the difference? And so one is very empowering and one takes the power away from others. Kids who grow up in an environment of constant praise are set up to need that in their life. And that cripples them in a way because they don't feel good about themselves unless they're getting it every day or every other day or whatever it is. And they have the ability to give to themselves what they're looking for from somebody else. And the second teacher understood that. So, can you teach people the internal locus of control? Can you teach people to learn to trust their own judgment and not rely on other people's judgment? That's the difference with praising evaluative. Now, this is very important in the workplace, too, because a lot of supervisors, managers, and leaders think that the way you become a really good supervisor, manager, leader is you run around and tell everybody how great they are. I'm not against that. I'm just saying there's a more powerful way to do it. So if a team has just had a big success, it'd be really, really powerful to go into that team and say, so let's talk for a minute about what it is you feel most proud of. Let's talk for a minute about what you think were the characteristics or the ingredients that led to this success. What were you all doing that made this work? And so, because what are you doing now? You're empowering them to remember the skills or the processes they used and that they own so that they could use them in other situations, right? You're taking a moment when you could have dismissed it with a praising evaluatively thing, and you're turning it into a teachable moment where we're reminding ourselves of how we empowered ourselves to do this. Do you hear the difference?